Hey guys, Snupy here. So it's finally time to make my guide for Feral Druid in the patch 10.1. We're going to cover everything you need to know in this video for Feral Druid PvP, going from the single target build and rotation, the Cleave build and rotation, also when to play which build. We're going to go over the PvP talents, also when to play what, gearing guide, so biz stats, and kind of what gear you want to aim for, and potentially what to play in different builds. And then also general tips for Feral Druid in PvP. Okay, so starting off, let's kind of cover the basics of the Feral Druid builds. So we have two main build types. It's the single target in quotations because it's not really single target. It's just less cleave heavy than the full-on cleave, but you can still cleave with it by spreading rip manually and rake and moonfire for that matter. And then we have the cleave builds. So the single target builds and the cleave builds. And then within those categories, you can like have quite a few variations. For example, with clone, without clone. And a question I get a lot is, what do we play? Like, when do you play cleave? When do you play single target? And to be honest, it's a bit of a hard question to just answer generally because it really depends on game to game, but I'll give a few examples. So, example in twos. I will usually play more for single target build, which you're going to see later in the video. But if I'm facing like a Beastmastery Hunter, Unholy DK, or Demo Lock, then there's so many pets to cleave that even in twos then I'll cleave. Or let's say in threes, it's a demo or anything again, I'll cleave. It's a melee cleave. They're stacked the whole time, I'll cleave. But if it's a big map, casters and like 12 run arena, there's gonna be like no chance to really cleave them all with Primaraph. Then I will go for the single target option. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind that it's a game-to-game basis, and you're gonna ask yourself, will I be able to cleave multiple targets there consistently throughout the whole game? If the answer is yes, then cleave might be a great option for you. If the answer is no, then you probably want to be going the single target build. But now let's get to the actual builds, talk about Cyclone and what role that plays into all this. So maybe the biggest change to Feral Druid in Type 1 is the new talent called Wild Attunement. The Cyclone talent. Every time you land a Cyclone, you get a free Feral Frenzy on the next bite, rip, or maim. It has no cooldown. You can kind of spam it. And therefore, our playstyle kind of morphs a bit into something it did not used to be. Because before, a Cyclone was not really worth picking up. And also lasts longer now than last patch because the CC reduction on the trinkets is gone. So clone went up from 5 to 6 second CC. So clone is a lot better now. And with the value of Frenzy, it's really, really good. So therefore, our builds, the cleave and single target, have kind of more opted into Cyclone, even though it's not always the move. So I would say that I try to play Cyclone more times than I don't. It is really, really good, especially like twos. I play pretty much every game. When it comes to game modes like 3v3 and Shuffle, though, I'd say it's way more comp dependent. So, for example, if I'm playing Shuffle, and on the enemy team, I see a Warrior, a Demon Warlock, and a Rest Shaman. And into this, casting clones will be really hard. A bunch of kicks, a bunch of micro CC, coils, whatever it is, right? A lot of CC coming through. And me trying to Cyclone might just get me killed. I'm going to be in a bad spot. I'll be taking way too much damage. I'm not going to be doing my damage. And the time investment that should like land clones might be way too high. Not saying you couldn't play into this. It could be done. Especially like certain maps. But overall, that's just a scenario where I probably would not opt for the Cyclone. But again, so what it does is if I cast a clone, the clone doesn't even have to land, by the way. The cast has to be completed. It could be on a totem. It could be anything. As long as the cast is done, you will get the buff. And it's called Wild Attunement. Your next bite, maim, or rip will give you a free frenzy. So this can be spammed. So into anything with good positioning behind a pillar, it could be done. But sometimes, one more example is if I'm facing something I can just fully cleave, like a Demo Warlock and Beam Hunter in Shuffle, for example. Into this, that's when I have full uptime, just go max cleave, bleed everything, and never like leave cat form. Again, then clone might not be the move. So we have clone options of the single target and cleave build. With my single target, I'll pretty much always play clone unless I'm facing like a rogue mage in twos or something where I feel like I just want to opt for the more tankiness and I don't really see the value in clone. But 90% of the time, I'm playing Cyclone in the single target build. For the cleave build, I would say it depends more. There again, like I said, I'll play clone into most things Cleave unless I think I'm going to get trained down and I'm not going to have the uptime. And there's many examples that I can come with. Too many to really cover right now. But keep that in mind. It will depend a lot on the matchup. And it's got to think to yourself every game. Will I get the clone value here? Or will I just try to clone and die while doing it? That's the main thing. Now, onto the actual builds. The cleave and single target builds and the rotation that comes with them. So here we are with my favorite build and the one I played the most, I would say. And it's the single target, again, in quotations. It's not really single target, so cleave with it. But the single target cyclone build. It is really fun. It's really good. And this build can work in any scenario. Again, there's going to be more value in maybe cleaving sometimes and maybe like skipping close sometimes. But this build, it's going to work no matter what. Even in a cleave scenario, even in like a rogue mage tank scenario, you will get value in this build if played right. So, what it is, it's I'm not going to go through every talent, by the way, but I'm just going to cover the main things. We're going down here, grabbing Merciless Claws. One change from last season is that we're not going Moment of Clarity. They buffed Merciless Claws, so we're going this instead. And energy is not really an issue at all with a build like this. We're going with Lunar. Actually got buffed quite a bit as well, so actually the damage is decent now, not amazing. We also have Tiger's Tenacity. We have Blood Talons that got buffed from 2 to 3 stacks, which is actually a huge thing, which makes BT really, really good. Line Strength is a decent option. Maybe if you're a newer feral, you want to get this. Because it's easier to play with. But I do recommend getting used to BT. And now this 3 stacks is way easier to keep up. We also, of course, have Feral Frenzy. We have Swarm. So this build is like a more fun version of the Cyclone build or the Necrolord build from Shadowlands. Because we're not really stuck to one target. We can also cleave. And it's like a more fluent playstyle of that version of Feral. Also, like stacking BT and Frenzy was not a thing back then. You had one of them, right? So I love this build. Incarn also got changed. You might or know this, but it now stores up to 3 overcap comp points of Incarn, and it generates 1 comp point every 1.5 seconds passively. And if overcap, it stores up to 3. So one thing I see like quite a few Ferals do is like not spending comp points fast enough. If you overcap over 3, it's wasted. So make sure like you spend them fast. And there's so many comp points to go around. A bite, has the keyboard, I'm back at 5 already. Bite again, right? The comp points come by really quick when on Incarn. So make sure you're actually spending those. Very, very, very important. We got the Vein Ripper, Circle of Life and Death combination. We do have Relentless Predator. This got nerfed a bit. You could swap this out and put it somewhere else, for sure. Maybe even like Apex or Moment of Clarity. But for now, this is feeling really good. On this side of the tree, we do have Cyclone, of course. We do have Remove Corruption. This one is not really relevant in some matchups, but I kind of like having it in general. But you definitely can swap it out sometimes if you want to do that. And Cyclone, pretty like standard single target stuff. The rest of it's, we have Heart of the Wild, Protective Pack, and Renewal. This build has like quite a bit of off feeling. So they actually buffed Swiftman and Rejuve as well. And also they buffed this Protective Pack. And with Heart, you can do a good amount of healing. So keep that in mind. In double DPS, this build is awesome. But now, let's dive into the rotation part of the guide. So now for the rotation to the single target build. So keep in mind, that is very similar to how it was before, right? It's very similar to the Shadowlands playstyle, but also how it was last season. Even though it has changed a bit, especially now that we have Cyclone on the brain, that we got to kind of weave into our general rotation. But now for the opener. So when it comes to opener, keep in mind that Blood Talons is very important to remember. But sometimes it bugs out and it procs on 1 or 2 generators instead of 3, which means you're going to get it earlier on. If you can notice this, you're going to save yourself like 1 global and just rip instantly. If it doesn't proc, you got a Moonfire or Slash to make it proc. So, for example, I have Fury and Stealth, Rake, Feral Frenzy, Swarm, Moonfire or Slash to proc BT if needed, Rip, Shred, Bite. Incarn in all this is going to be used instantly. I didn't say it because it's actually off global, but you actually just open up Incarn instantly, and you try to get it back as soon as possible because it's going to CDR, cooldown reduce, thanks to Heart of the Lion. But yeah, let's open up. So Fear and Stealth, Rake, Feral Frenzy, Swarm, Moonfire to Park PT, Rip, Shred, Bite, Shred, Bite, Proc and do BT here. Might overcop a couple. There we go. Bite, Bite. Try to keep Thrash up when you're biting as well because it's going to increase damage thanks to Taste for Blood. Bite again. Bite again. Proc and do BT here. Bite again. Replay some bleeds. And there we go. That's like a pretty simple opener. If you want to go back and rewatch that, go look down at the right part here. You can see the abilities that have used. You can track that. And yeah, that's like the basic opener for the single target build. So after having done this opener, you're going to have a lot of pressure going, a lot of bleeds rolling. Now, what you do, of course, will depend on the game and what it asks for you. But let's kind of cover how to use Cyclone in this build. So let's say I have full bleed sub, right? And I'm not really like trying to do a go now. I've already stunned. They're on DR. At this point, you can do clones. You might want to clone the healer, clone a pet, clone a totem, whatever it might be. You want to try and land some cyclones to get your free Feral Frenzies. Bite. Remember, roots are massive for this here. Roots. Cyclone again. Free Frenzy. Now I'm kind of overdoing it to kind of prove a point. Of course, now it's on a dummy. It's going to be different in the game. I actually have a video, though, from recently in Arena kind of showing this in action that I'm going to link under the video as well. But pretty much like looking for cyclone windows on other things. It could be a pet. It could be a totem. It could be literally anything. It could be a fully DR clone as well. All that has happened is that the cast has to be completed. For example, like this clip right here. Frenzy, Swarm, Maim. Yes. Swap it on PS Air. Frenzy. Skin. I press Renewal Air. Clone. Frenzy. Incarn. Get this. Use Jam. Nice. One thing I want to mention is that after the opener, right? Like, what do? Usually it's going to be like run, bleed, cyclone. But then when the DR is off, the next stun is going to come up. Make sure like you maim again. I get a bunch of questions like, what do you do after like the first go? Bleed up. Number one thing. Make sure bleeds don't fall off. All right? Run, kite around, cast cyclones, root things, stun things, peel, kick. And then stun again when the DR is off. And then you do your go. And then the third stun again, get our frenzy back, do your go. Feral has to play so many roles that it's kind of hard to just like say what you do between the goes. But basically, whatever the situation calls for. If it's peeling, healing, cycloning, rooting, of course, those kind of go with each other. It can depend a lot. Now I'm just going to show it on a rogue, on a player, my damage. So let's dive into it. He's fully PP geared. So if I open up, Rake, Feral Frenzy, Incarn to Air, Rip. We're going to send a lot of bites now. Bite, Shred, Bite, Cheat Death. But yeah. SL is a lot of damage. A lot of bursts coming through, a lot of bites. And the best thing about this damage is going to ramp up more and more as Incarn is up. The bleed's going to stack higher and higher. And the damage gets pretty crazy. But yeah, now on to the next part of the guide. So I would definitely recommend watching more of like my actual gameplay. Kind of see how I Cyclone in Arena. But again, Cyclone is not always a move. And if you don't want to play Cyclone, or the matchup doesn't really call for it, you could always go for the more tanky option of this build, which is right here. Make the camera smaller too so you guys can see it. All the builds will be linked under the video, by the way. So here's like the more tanky and non-Cyclone version of this build. We got Thick Hide and Iron Fur and no Cyclone. So yeah, that is a single target build. Now, let's head on to the Cleave build. And then, on to talents. So now for the Cleave build. So like with the single target build, we do have cyclone version and a non-cyclone version. But first, gonna cover the right side. So as I mentioned earlier in the guide, the main difference on Cleave and single target will be Primal Wrath, which kind of changes up the whole playstyle. Because when you're cleaving, it's all about just like hitting as many targets with this as possible, and that's like the main part of the whole builds, the whole build. But there's more than one. So yeah, keep that in mind. So here we are, Primal Wrath, double clawed rake, which means his rake can go on two things. Can even double rake from stealth, like so. Pretty huge. Goes down here, pretty standard stuff. Taser blood. We do have rip and tear, and we also have tear from wounds. Like reapplying bleeds is great in this build, which we'll touch on more in the rotation part of it. But basically, you just want to like spam reapply it. It doesn't matter if you just applied rip through Primal Wrath. Reapply it again instantly if possible. It's really good to do. We also have Blood Talons. This last season, I was playing Lion Strength in the Cleave build. Now, with Blood Talons being 3 stacks, it feels way better in a Cleave scenario. And I think it's definitely the winner now. With the value, we're playing with Raging Fury here to extend the duration of Tiger's Fury instead of Tiger's Tenacity, which is not really needed in this build. Even in the single target build, we could go for Raging Fury, so keep that in mind. But yeah, we got Apex, Biprocs from Rips, and in generally speaking, just way more Cleave. We also do go for Mercer's Claws here. On this side of the tree, maybe like the biggest thing here to note is Astral Influence, which gives us the extra range on the Cleave, which kind of enables us to cleave way harder, especially in Shuffle when things might not be that stacked, but we can still cleave them, even if they're like fairly far apart. Again, Cyclone. Before, we never really went Cyclone and Cleave. I have found it to be quite nice this season. There's definitely some value there. Not say that you always want a Cyclone in Cleave. Earlier in the guide, we talked about like when to play what. So, yeah, sometimes it's worth, sometimes it's not worth. Here's the Cyclone version, and here is the non-Cyclone version. Just keep in mind that there are 2 versions here. This was more tanky. We get Typhoon, we get Hearts as well, while the Cyclone version might be missing those things. But for now, I'm going to show the Cyclone version. So, let's dive into the rotation. So here we are. We're trying to Cleave open in a Shuffle, for example. And we're playing the Cleave build, of course. There's a bunch of things to Cleave, maybe double melee stacked. We go in, want to try to get the double rake out the gates. That is the first thing. Beyond that, just try spread the bleeds on as many things as possible. The thing about cleaving, the rotation will really depend on what happens. But the goal will be to bleed everything. So I'll show you like a typical opener now. So Fury and Stealth, instantly incarn. I auto-type by accident. Reset. Fury and Stealth, incarn, rake, Feral Frenzy, thrash, proc BT, and then start ripping everything. Spread the rakes too. Keep procking BT. Spam reapply rip with Blood Talons when possible. Like so. Biprocs will come through. Spend the Biprocs. Guys, Biprocs are huge. It will buff your bleeds by 30. Actually, no, 25% now. Because Forces is gone. But yeah, just you see, spam bleed, use Biprocs, and there's not much more to it. Like when it comes to the damage part of it, like this. Hopefully, you get the point. There's not like really an exact rotation. Maybe it's gonna be like one new target to bleed. Then gotta rake him, reapply rip on everything. The most important part about like damaging with a Cleave build is being good about where you stand with Primal. For example, if I'm hitting these 3, right? That's fine. But if I stand here, I'm suddenly hitting 3 more targets. Even this one. The range with Astral Influence is really wide. And I notice many Ferals do not stand well at all. And they're missing out on millions of damage over whole Shuffle by standing really badly. So keep in mind, the range is large, and try to like, use it to your advantage by cleaving more things. And also taking less damage. Example, if I'm cleaving like a a warrior, and a red paladin, and they're right there. I can be here and still do a good amount of my damage while keeping a range where they can't at least just auto attack me the whole game. Of course, they're gonna connect as well, but yeah, use your range basically. That's the main point. So we do have cyclone in this build as well, right? So when it comes to like cycloning in Cleave build, you don't want to overdo it because then you might just miss out on a bunch of Cleave damage. But let's say you have a lot of pressure, maybe you can move away from 1 second, root a guy, cast a clone, get a frenzy, bite with a proc, and then frenzy it up. So it's kind of like hard to explain just like right now on a dummy. But basically, if a window opens up, let's say the enemies have used all their kicks on a healer, they have like no real stops for you, cast a cyclone, right? Just like try to look for these small windows. They will open up, and you can also create them with stuns, with bash, with roots, and even like off your teammates' CC. There are windows that's gonna open up that you gotta take. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, so the rotation for the Cleave build, it's pretty simple. Pretty much like just bleed everything, bite when you can, and then when it comes to stunning, it's the same thing as single targets, where you just want to stun on the ghost. Pretty much stun off DR. Let's say like my second ghost coming up now. I have full bleeds rolling, get 5 comp points. I maim, I frenzy, I bite. This is a go, you know? For example, like that. So, that is the Cleave build and rotation. Now, let's move on to the PP talents and when to play what in what builds. So, when it comes to the choice of your PP talents, it's going to depend quite a bit on a few things. The comp you're playing and the comp you're facing, and also the build you're playing. Do you have Cyclone? Do you not have Cyclone? And that will, of course, dictate if you play talent like Wild Attunement, which has great value if you have Cyclone, has 0 value if you don't have Cyclone. Same with High Winds. So, for this part of the guide, I'm just going to kind of explain the different talents and when to play them, and when they will be good and when they will not be good, and then they kind of give you the tools that they can apply when you're doing a shuffle. Then you got to ask yourself, what am I playing? What am I facing? And then kind of pick based on that. So, let's start off, and let's say I'm playing my Cleave Cyclone build in shuffle, which means Wild Attunement will have great value. Thorns. This will depend a lot on what I'm facing. Am I facing double melee, like a red warrior and a warrior? No, a red paladin and a warrior. Then Thorns has great value. Am I facing like, let's say, a mage and a shadow priest? Then has 0 value. So that depends a lot. Wicked Claws, kind of similar. If I'm playing with a hunter or warrior on my team, then they will cover the effect from the sound, which means I don't need it. If I'm playing with a mage or a shadow priest on my team, then I do need it. Leader got nerfed. Still decent, gives movement speed now instead of crit, so not really like what it used to be, but still decent. 10% movement speed can't be felt, and it's also for your teammates, so can be quite nice, like stick on targets. But I would say it's like a bit of a worse option now than it used to be. So if I'm cleaving and cycloning, I will usually go something like this. We got Wild Attunement, Wicked, and King of the Jungle. I would say like maybe most shuffles, if I'm cleaving clone, I'll play this right here. If I'm not playing Cleave clone, if I'm just playing Cleave, then I'd probably go for either Thorns if needed, or maybe Wound if Thorns is not needed, or even Strength of the Wild if it's going to be maybe some off heals going through. Even though Rigorf doesn't heal much, so it's rare that I go for this. But yeah, hopefully kind of get the pointer though. Things depend a lot. Same with King of the Jungle. It has great value in Cleave, but if I'm playing my single target build, then the value is quite a bit less because it works based on how many rips are up. And then I might go for a more single target option like Wound, like Thorns if needed, or if I'm playing Cyclone, like High Winds. So here's something you'll see me playing a lot is Wild Attunement, Wicked Claws, and High Winds in like 2v2 or even Shuffle, depending on my team and what I'm facing. So yeah, this part again might be a bit confusing because I can't like really just give you one loadout. So just go, that's just gonna be the move in every shuffle or every arena, because it's going to depend a lot from game to game, from round to round, even in shuffles. But yeah, so hopefully I kind of give you some info there, and then you got to take that, ask yourself the question, what am I facing, and what am I playing? And then pick based on that. Okay, now let's kind of talk about the gearing, though. The BIS lists, stats, all the stuff. Let's dive into it. So when it comes to gearing, because I'm still in the first week of the season as I'm making this on live, I obviously don't have full gear. It's not quite where we want it to be, but we do have the public test run, the PTR, where I kind of show you guys what gear I'm going to be going for as the season goes on and on. So for stats right now, I would say it's Verse, Mastery, Haste, Crit. But Haste definitely has more value now than it did before because of the new Cyclone. So if I'm playing like a Cyclone build, then I probably like when I lean a bit more heavy towards Haste than I would if I wasn't playing Cyclone. But in general, the build I'm going to recommend and the build I'm playing is just a mix. Going pretty good Haste, but still mainly focusing on the Verse Mastery. So pretty much from Conquest, buying Verse Mastery on every piece you can. And on the piece you can't, you go Haste Verse. So let's go through it. Headpiece, Verse Mastery. Neck, Verse Mastery. Shoulders, Tear Set. Sign on this too, also Verse Mastery. But we're only going 2 sets, in my opinion, because the 4 sets are nerfed, or the Tear Sets in general are nerfed for PvP. And it's not very good for Feral Druid. So the reason we're getting 2 set is because they both have Verse, so we take no Verse loss in going for the 2 set. Going 4 set, we're going to lose quite a bit of Verse. Again, it's on PTR, guys. It's not going to be in chance on some of it, and these, of course, should be the PP version. But you get the point. It's to kind of just showcase what pieces we want. Verse Mastery Cloak, Haste Verse on the chest, Haste Verse on the wrists, Haste Verse on the weapon. We got the Insignia Trinket here, Medallion. So what I think is the move for the rings is one crafted Verse Master Ring, and then potentially one Haste Verse ring. For like the second ring, you can definitely kind of mix that around, go for more of a heavier Verse, heavier Haste or heavier Mastery, depending on what you're kind of playing. Both of those will be great options. So keep that in mind. Those two can be changed quite freely, depending on if you just want some more haste for like a Cyclone build. So on the legs and feet, so on the finger and feet rather, we have the crafted pieces. So the crafted pieces I'm going to recommend the most, it's the 510 main stat one on the boots. Is really good. Even though they are crit verse, it's such a good proc that you definitely want it. And also the 90% health mastery one is also great. So on the PTR, they're going to be lower eye level, but on live you want these in the highest eye level possible. The Shadow Flame crafted ones. So yeah, just kind of pretend these are higher item level. Precognition is one that people kind of ask me a lot about. Like, can we go precog when you Cyclone? I think yes, it could be good. But overall, I'm not going to like recommend it. But I think it's definitely something that could be fun to use. Maybe even like a precog Convoke. But I guess I might make a Convoke guide too if you guys want that. I got on how to Convoke in the current patch. So let me know in the comments if you want that. But yeah. So for now, I'm going to recommend these two embellishments the most. The Mastery one and the main stat proc one. We got Haste Verse on the legs, also Tear Piece with Verse. We got Haste Verse on the waist. And we got Verse Mastery on the hands. And with that gear, I think it's looking really good. Again, you can like tweak things here. Go a bit more haste, a bit more mastery here and there. But this kind of gear will work in any scenario always. And it's going to do great. So to close the guide out, let's cover like a few tips for Feral PvP that are just massive. That might seem kind of obvious, but try to just keep them in mind as you're playing Feral PvP. The first one is your movement speed. You are the most mobile spec in the game. You need to use this to your advantage. If it's pre-cutting a go, if it's just like connecting on the target you want to go on, it could be defensively, offensively. your speed is maybe the best part of being a feral, the most fun part. Example, let's say that the enemy team is setting up to see on a healer. If you kite well, you can maybe just run before the go even starts. They see you're gone, they gotta cancel the go. Or swap target, right? Or just like stick in on your target. No one can really get away from you if you use your stuff correctly. Your speeds, dash, roar, cat form, travel form, even like jumping to a teammate. Can I jump to him? Like this, with wall charge is huge for getting away as well. So yeah, tip number 1 is you're going to be using your mobility properly. Tip number 2. And not really a tip, it's more just like something you're really going to focus on. And that is your bleed up time. As a feral druid, if you have bleeds up, you're doing good. Generally speaking. Example. I do my go. I have full bleeds up now. And I start kiting. Now when I'm kiting, of course I'm not doing the most damage ever, but the bleeds are still ticking. I'm still getting value. I'm still doing damage. If I'm kiting away, but I don't have bleeds up, then I'm missing out on a ton of damage, losing pressure, losing momentum, and it's really bad. So really try to hone in on bleed up time. Rip, Moonfire, Rake, Thrash, less important, but still want to keep it up. So yeah, guys, really hone in on bleed up time and cleave and single targets. It should be maybe your biggest focus as a feral druid. And I see like a lot of ferals, even like on fairly high rating, slack pretty hard on the uptime of their bleeds. Sometimes it's gonna fall off, but yeah, just try really focus on it. And my third tip for now and last one will be bear form. It's a great ability, makes you very tanky. If you can pre-bear from a stun, let's say there's a monk coming to leg sweep you. If you can pre-bear from that leg sweep, that will often mean the difference of life and death. Or a rogue kidney shot or stormbolt. Pre-bear forming stuff is huge. Or just sitting bear from in general when you're taking damage and you can't get away. It's going to make healing you a lot easier. And it's going to make your chance of living way higher. Go bear form, throw up a heal. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Of course, there's many more tips you can say, guys. You can also come ask me my stream if you want more tips there. Anything specific, just come by my stream, ask me in Discord, anywhere in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer those. But yeah, thanks for watching the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.